I want to invite your attention to Ecclesiastes chapter 4. I'm beginning a new series today called Better Together. I really want to challenge those of us who are in the body of Christ to stick with the church, but there might be someone here today, somebody who's unsaved, who needs to know the benefit and blessing of being a part of God's church. And maybe there's a believer who's in between churches. You need to put down some roots in a local church, place where you can grow and serve. And in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, beginning at verse 7, I'm going to conclude reading at verse 12. And it reads like this: Again, I saw vanity under the sun. One person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to all his toil, and his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and an unhappy business. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up again. If two lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. As you're on your way to your seat, look at your neighbor and tell them there's strength in numbers. You can be seated in the presence of God. Strength in numbers. Strength in. I want you to bear with me as we wade through this message from a seldom sought book as it relates to sermons. You know, Ecclesiastes is one of the most peculiar books of the Bible. Based on verse 1 of chapter 1, we can reasonably assume that Ecclesiastes was written by King Solomon, who is known as the wisest and richest king to have ever lived. In Ecclesiastes, Solomon has devoted himself to discerning the meaning of life in all matters. You know, Ecclesiastes is a deep book. What we'll note in the first verse of this book is that even as Solomon is a king, it's almost as if he strips off his royal regalia and royal titles only to be known in the original Hebrew that is Koheleth. Let the church say Koheleth. Y'all speaking Hebrew today. In some translations, Koheleth means preacher. It means teacher. It's one who is a wise sage. And this era that this book emerges from is one in which the people were trying to adjust themselves to a new reality. They were adjusting to life in this new market-driven economy that was emerging at the beginning of the Persian era. The spirit of the age was one of disillusionment and melancholy. And so as the culture was developing and as the spirit of the age set in, this teacher sage reflects and thinks deeply about the issues of life. He thinks about, if you read this book, about immortality and about the topic of lasting gain. He reflects upon what it is to live a life that has great achievements, immense work, immense wealth and popularity. And the conclusion that he comes to after considering all of these subjects that are involved in life, he comes to this conclusion and says that all of these things that we can amass in life or be known by in life are vanity. Vanity is a word in Hebrew that etymologically speaking gives us the word picture of smoke. And smoke is here one moment and gone the next. And what Solomon or Koheleth is trying to get you and I to understand, that all of the things you can accumulate in life, all of the wealth and riches you can amass in life, literally mean nothing. The only thing that is certain in life, according to Koheleth, is death. And in the midst of such a dismal outlook on which we strive for in life, this teacher sage has found that there is in fact something in this world of nothingness that brings life meaning and value, and that is the relationships that we have in life. And what better person to give an assessment of life than Solomon? We look at Solomon. He had more wealth than all the other kings of the world. So wealthy that the Queen of Sheba, who was a wealthy woman in her own right, had heard so much about it, she had to come and see it for herself. And when she came and saw it for herself, she had to look at Solomon's wealth and say, the half hasn't even been told. And when it came to pleasure, Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. No pleasure was unknown to him. He was exposed to the best that life had to offer. He dined in the most elegant and sumptuous ways. And yet, this man who we would say has it all in life suggests to us that you can have it all in life, but it all amounts to nothing. Yet what he does say is of the value of real, meaningful, and authentic relationships on the journey of life. And we who are believers need to reject this rugged individualism that reflects a certain independence from anyone else's support. However, brothers and sisters, it goes against God's design, because as far back as Genesis and the first human being who God looks at, God makes this assessment and says to Adam, it's not good for man to be alone. And one can venture to say that God made us perfectly with a divine design defect, and that is that we need each other in order to make it in life. None of us are built to face life alone. And I know it, yeah, you looking at me in that tone of voice today. I know you saying, I don't need anybody, but you're really not built like that. You're not. We are meant to live our lives in relationship with others, and as believers, we are meant to be in community as it is expressed best as God's church. And what we learn not only in our own personal journey is about the power of being connected to and in relationship with others. That is the strength in numbers that we arrive at in God's church. Listen, it doesn't matter if we find ourselves in a small or large church. What's important is that we have found ourselves as part of the family of God as we journey on the pathway of Christian discipleship in life. Listen, when you are sick, down, depressed, getting over a breakup, grieving the loss of a loved one, licking your wounds because somebody hurt your feelings, hear me, God has given you his church where you can find strength in community with other believers. And listen, I know there's some sense of cynicism out here about the church. You're saying the preacher just trying to take all my money. Well, you don't say that when you go over to Southland and down to Tunica. I don't like going to church. They messy at church. Well, the folk at your beauty salon are messy. That's how you learn all the tea. We need the church. Even in this age of social isolation, there's something special about coming together. I'm looking across this space on today. Some of you may be working remotely, but whether you admit it or not, there's something special about being in the same place at the same time with the people who you're working with toward the same goal. And listen, I'm not condemning nobody for streaming service today, but there is something about coming to the same place at the same time to lift up our God that intensifies our worship and strengthens our walk with God. Do I have a witness in this place? So what I want to suggest today is that when facing the adventures and adversities along life's journey, heed godly and wise counsel to never walk alone. So I want to lift this up. There's strength in numbers in three ways here in this text. Text first tells us about the futility of solitary pursuits in verses 7 and 8. It speaks to us about security in authentic partnership in verses 9 through 12a. And then in verse 12, it teaches us about the durability of providential reinforcement. Hang in here with me. Number one, we understand the futility of solitary pursuits. The sage, the teacher, in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, beginning in verse 7, is painting the picture of a person who is the personification of rugged individualism. This person has no commitment to meaningful relationships. Verse 8 puts it this way: one person who has no other. They have seemingly renounced such relationships as they have no son or brother. They are the consummate workaholic. Because either by their obsession with their career or the nature of their work, there's no end to their toil. From can't see in the morning to can't see at night, they are working because they have placed not only all of their energy, effort, and time in work, but they have reduced their worth and value in life to what they do. And although their work provides compensation, it seems like it's never enough. It might provide adequate compensation, but what we learn from this text, there's more of an internal issue that is present. The text says that their eyes are never satisfied with riches. This is that person that's like that the rich fool that we looked at last week, that they've not found contentment. Enough is never enough. They're chasing the evasive next high, but are never satisfied. And when they come to a place where they're able to assess their lives, they have to ask themselves a probing question to get to the core of such a busy yet unfulfilling life. For whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? They've reached a point to realize that throwing themselves into work, denying themselves of any meaningful relationships, and not even finding a modicum of enjoyment in life has led to vanity, which I told you earlier is a word that means it has led to nothing. And to punctuate and give an apt description of the kind of life that this person has been living, the sage says they are experiencing what they would call unhappy business. Imagine spending the entirety of your life working only to discover that although you may have money to account for in your financial institutions or instruments, and although you may be able to see the roof over your head, the car in the garage or driveway, the social media post of the elaborate international vacation, that it all amounts to nothing. But even worse, to have it all and find out that you have nothing because you have no one to share it with. The fact of the matter is that there are some of us who are so obsessed with work and our relentless pursuit of more money and popularity that although you may be in a relationship, a friendship, or a marriage, it is as if you're living your life as if you're still single. And what this sage in Ecclesiastes is trying to help us all understand is that we should not allow the value of being in relationship and community with others to be devalued while we allow the things that can depreciate, that we're able to afford from the work that we do, to take precedence in our life. Worth and value in work is not determined by what it can afford you. Rather, it's about who you can work with and for the sake of which extends to the wider community but starts with one's family. Y'all, there's a futile pursuit to go through life and to think that getting more stuff is where you're going to find fulfillment. You know, Ellen Goodman writes in the Minneapolis Tribune of a tragic story of a man who worked as hard as the man described in verses 7 and 8. This man died at the age of 51, and his cause of death was basically that his heart gave out. Because the life that he lived, he worked in the office 6 days a week, most days until 8 or 9 in the evening. He literally worked himself to death. And on the day of the funeral, you know how it is, and this is the reality we all got to come to. As soon as you're gone, they already looking for your replacement. You're not cold in the morgue. They ain't even let you down at the cemetery or put you in a mausoleum. They're already searching for somebody to take your place. Now let that sink in when you... But y'all, the most devastating statement made at the funeral was his widow's response to someone who was trying to give her some encouragement that it just fell flat. They said to this grieving widow, "I know how much you'll miss him." Never speak to the grieving and tell them how much you know you're going to... And when the wife heard this person say, "I know how much you'll miss him," the wife said in reply, "Oh, I already have." Because in life, he invested more time and energy than in his work, than in his relationship. And this is not even scripted. I need to talk to somebody in here today. I know you feel the pressure to provide for your family, but don't live an oxymoronic life where you're working to provide for a family that you don't have time to enjoy the life you provided for them. Preach, Pastor Turner. I'm doing the best that I can. But then we learn of the security and authentic partnership. That's in verse 9 through 12a. Listen, verses 7 and 8 talk about this work-obsessed individual. Beginning at verse 9, we see an alternative to this work-obsessed person. Verse 9 shows us a way not just to approach our work, but also to approach life. It says this, it's deep, it's real deep. Listen to what it says. Two are better than one. Those who find meaning and value in pursuing life's challenges in relationship and community with other people will soon discover the simple yet profound reality that two are better than one. One can only do so much alone, but when two work together, motivated towards the same goal and committed to the same values, they're able to multiply their output. Consequently, they're able to have a good reward for their toil. You've heard that old adage, many hands makes light work. And I want you to hear the sage drive the point home by making three cases based upon this image of a journeying pilgrim. And it's important to know that in the ancient Near East, travel was nowhere near as convenient as it is today. Most times, if they were blessed, they had a beast of burden, a camel, a mule, or a horse they could ride upon. But the common everyday person only had the ingenuity of putting one foot in front of the other. And as they traveled the roads were dangerous. They were dangerous because of the road conditions, the threats of wildlife and criminals, and exposure to the elements. And so as a result, it was important that people learn this one truth when traveling: never walk alone. The roads in that day and time were not paved. They were most times stony or rocky roads that would make it difficult to maintain footing. The traveler could easily stumble along the way, and if they were near a ditch or a steep incline, serious injury was possible. If someone was traveling such a path by themselves, if they fell into a ditch, there would possibly be no way of getting out. But if they had a travel companion, if or when they fell, there would always be someone to extend a helping hand to help them out of what they found themselves in and lift them up. That's the first image, the traveler that might fall alone and never get out but find help when they have a traveling companion. But the second image is one that deals with the climate. You know, most days in the ancient Near East, it was hot during the day. It wasn't just cool at night, it would become quite cold. As such, if one is on a journey and they're not near a village where they can find shelter in an inn, it will require them to sleep out in the open, exposed to the elements. And if one is alone, they would find themselves in a predicament where it was almost impossible to have a restful night. Because our body has a instinctive response to the cold, that if we are not able to find some cover to give us some warmth, our bodies begin to convulse and to shiver as a reaction to be able to keep the body warm. And I don't know anybody who can find rest if you're shivering. And so in these cold elements, the sage says if two lie together, let me say parenthetically, that is not specifically a reference to sexual intimacy. If two lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? That is, one is going to survive the exposure to the elements along the journey. One has to be connected to someone who can help sustain them when the odds are stacked against you. Y'all with me? And then they give this third image. What made travel in that time unsafe was the reality that the criminally minded would find the wilderness a great place for lawlessness. You know, they could hide out in the wilderness. There was seldom law enforcement to protect them on the roads that are in the middle of nowhere. So if one was traveling alone, they were at a significantly higher risk of being assaulted, attacked, and robbed than if they were traveling with someone else. And so the sage says this at the beginning of verse 12, and though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. That with the presence of at least another person, it might make the criminal second guess attacking them. And if by chance there is an attack, two can fight off an attacker better than one can. None of this is deep. It's just common sense. And this is the same for us in life. We undermine our ability to reach higher, accomplish greater, have a larger impact, and fulfill the ultimate purpose God has placed us here to fulfill when we try to face life by ourselves. We find ourselves on the side of life's road without anybody close enough to give us a hand to get us out of what we're in. Or we find ourselves exposed and vulnerable to the changing winds of culture and the vicious attacks of those who want to inflict pain and suffering in our lives when we try to travel life's road by ourselves. But there, brothers and sisters, is safety in real and authentic partnership. I'm not talking about folk who are just around you to get what they can from you. Some folk are just around you so that they have a front row seat to your misery. I'm talking about real and authentic partnership. We all need somebody who is close enough to us that when we are tempted to make a bad moral decision, they help to keep us on the straight and narrow. That's why some of us are off track in life. There ain't nobody who can say anything to us. But you need to have at least one friend who, when you're getting ready to make a wrong decision, who will step up and confront you and say, bro, sis, you need to reconsider what you're doing. We need somebody to be with us when we've got to face the dark night of the soul and find ourselves in a spiritual wilderness to help to keep us warm through the night until we can see the sun rise on a new day. And we need somebody when our enemies, our foes, and our haters have us surrounded. We need to have someone who's willing to jump into the fight and throw some bows right alongside us. Look at somebody and say, we need each other to survive. So even as we heed the words of Koheleth, we must be reminded of that African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And one of the sure and certain places you can find this kind of partnership and authentic friendship is in the church. For some who are here, I need to challenge you to shift your understanding of the church. The church does not reside at any particular address. This is the building where we gather. The church is made up of all of us who make up a community of believers who are determined that we're on the Lord's side. We want to be more like Jesus, and we want to express God's love in this world. But third and finally, we learn about the durability of providential reinforcement. Verse 12 is what's called a numeric rhetorical pattern. It starts with lesser numbers and builds to a higher number in order to work towards a climax. Listen again to verse 12. Listen. And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. Did you see that? The larger the numbers become, it is giving the effect that the stronger and surer we become as individuals and as a community. I love this expression, threefold cord. We often reference this in the context of a couple that's getting ready to join their lives together in holy matrimony. The threefold cord. It is an image that comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh that precedes the writing of Ecclesiastes. I'm taking some of you all back to your high school literature class where you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the hero Gilgamesh wanted to pursue his friend Enkidu and get him to go with him on a dangerous journey. And as it's captured in the Epic of Gilgamesh, this is what Gilgamesh says to Enkidu. Stop, Enkidu. The second will not die. The towed boat will not sink. No one can sever the threefold cord. This threefold cord, church, is a reference to the crown knot that is typically used at the end of ropes to keep them from fraying. So it seems that the lesson is that two persons can be more productive by working together. If and when one falls, the other can pick the other up. And when they are vulnerable out in the cold, two can keep warm together. And when under attack, two can tango and fight off their enemy. And as good as two are together, what do you think three can do? And let me be clear. When I say three, I not only think there's strength when three people get together on one accord to fulfill the same purpose, but imagine if the third person in the three is our good and gracious God. Jesus says in Matthew 18, right after he teaches us in verses 15, 16, and 17 on down to verse 18 about what to do if you got an alt with your brother or sister. In that same context, Jesus says, truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Again, I say to you, if two of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. Look at verse 20 of Matthew 18. For where two or three are gathered in my name, there am I among them. That when you and I get together on the same things, on the same accord, with the same purpose, God shows up in the midst of it and strengthens our relationship. It's so strong that in the next chapter, in Matthew 19, when Jesus is speaking of the union of marriage, he says, and those y'all who are married or thinking about marriage, Jesus says, what therefore God has joined together, let not man or woman separate. Listen, when a couple has sense enough to keep other folk out and God at the center of their marriage, they are taking out a security contract because the enemy will attack. But if God is in that marriage, the enemy is going to be disappointed because they will not prevail because God is in the middle of that relationship. I say it all the time. I say it all the time. If your marriage is off track, it is because you've allowed God to only be an afterthought. But if you allow God to be at the center of your marriage, of your relationship, of your friendship, God has a way of providing strength to that marriage to hold it together so that no temptation will get in between the two of you. If you got God, if it's God, you, and your boo, you need to learn how to be like a pair of scissors, that if anybody else gets between it, you need to cut them. God being in a relationship not only strengthens the relationship, there's healing when God is in a relationship. Lloyd John Ogilvie, in his book Life Without Limits, says this: Our relationships are radically altered as we live in fellowship with Christ and allow the depth of his love to heal us. We're better together, especially when God is at the center of it all. I would that you will leave here to know there's strength in numbers. Don't live life alone. There ought to be somebody who joins you on the journey, headed in the same direction you're headed in. And you provide support and strength for them. And when you allow and invite God into the midst of that relationship, God provides your relationship the strength and durability to withstand not only attacks, but also the test of time. So since I know it's Labor Day, let me close this message like this. I want to help somebody today. Help somebody to stop wasting time. Possibly your food tastes more like lighter fluid than the seasoning you put on the meat. I want to help you. You know what I'm talking about. When you have all that food left over at the end of the cookout, let me give a pro grilling tip. When I first started grilling, I would waste a lot of time and lighter fluid trying to get the fire going and get the coals to the place they could sustain the heat in order to cook the food. And so I was squirting lighter fluid on coal like it was going out of style. What I didn't understand is that if I wanted to keep the fire going, I needed to bring the coals closer together. So fast forward a few years later, and I purchased what's called a chimney. And those who've used chimneys, you know that you load coals into the chimney, which brings them close and won't allow them to fall apart. And then beneath the chimney, I take what's called tumbleweeds. And I set those tumbleweeds on fire beneath those coals that are close together. And in a few minutes, the fire is going. And then a few minutes after that, my coals are ready to cook. And the fire doesn't go out because we discovered not only there is strength in numbers, but when they got close enough together, they could keep the fire going. That's what I want to tell you today. If you have allowed the fire to go out on your walk with Jesus Christ, if you have allowed the fire to go out in your life, it might just be that you have isolated yourself and found yourselves on the margins of a community. But if you can ever get together with some other people and let the fire of the Holy Spirit get in the middle of it, you're able to keep the fire burning. Do I have a witness here today that knows not only that we're better together, but there is strength in numbers? And that's what I want to challenge you with today. Those of you who are saved and a part of the church, stick with the church. No church is perfect. But when you're absent, the body is lacking something that it needs. So let's stay together. Let's love one another. Let's pray for each other. Let's speak the truth in love to one another. Let's make this place a place where we can come together and find healing and restoration and forgiveness. But then there might be someone here who's been skeptical of the church because of all the things that you have heard. But I want to challenge you, don't just go on what you heard. Experience it for yourself. And so as we're standing to our feet, there's somebody here who hasn't experienced the radical and unconditional love of God or received the grace of God. And I want you to know Christ loves you and wants a relationship with you. Listen, Christ is not just transactional. A relationship with Jesus is transformational. And if you are tired of living the same old disappointing life, I recommend Jesus to you. He'll make your life brand new. He'll give you a clearer perspective of your life and life's purpose. And so if you're here today and you've never put your faith, hope, and trust in Jesus, I want you to make your way down these aisles and to this altar to make the decision you know God is challenging you to make. You want to be saved, I want you to make your way down to this altar. But secondly, if you're here and you're already saved, but you're not connected to the church, I want you to do the very same thing. If the Lord has said this is the place where you are to connect, grow, and serve, I want you to just step out in the aisle, make your way down to this altar. We want to celebrate the decision that you're making today. If you responded to one of those two invitations, I want you to move right now as we're singing, while we're encouraging each other. Make a decision today that will not only make this life better, but will give the assurance of the life that is to come. My brother, my sister, we're waiting on you to make the decision that God is calling you to make. You're important to me. Come on. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive. I'm going to leave you alone and let you go to brunch, but I want you to help me extend this invitation, because where somebody's going to spend eternity is on the line. I want you to turn to somebody who's near you, who you didn't ride here with, and look them in the eye. Right now. Turn to somebody who you rode here with, didn't ride here with, and look them in the eye. First, smile at them. And I want you to look at them and say these words to them. Look at them and say, neighbor, if you need to be at the altar, I'll walk with you. Now ask them, do you need to be at the altar? Now tell the truth. Give a truthful answer. Tell the truth. If you know you need to be at the altar, say yes. And if that person said yes, I want you to take them by the hand and walk them into God's good and perfect will for their lives. Come on, we're going to sing this one more time. Be encouraged by these words. I need you. You need me. We're all a part.
We're all a part of God's body.
Stand with me. Agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is His will.
That every need.
You can send an email or a text message. You're important to me.
Are important to me. I need you
last time. Tell somebody you are.
You are important to me. I need you to.
Now come on, give God a big praise.